if you have any questions after the presentation. Okay. Um, Angel, do you want to start? Who are you? What are you doing? Why are you here? You're muted.
Well, we start really well. As I was trying to say before, my name is Angel Matilla, and for the past 8 years, I have been serving in the Global Ecovillage network of Europe as their IT manager. And one of the main tasks that I have there have to do with supporting with like all the various IT systems, but there is like a very strong strategic view towards ethical choices, and that's also the main reason why I'm here today with you.
Thank you. Handing over to Sam.
Thanks all. I work for Transition Network, now Transition Network International, which kind of supports the Transition Town movement. In a fairly similar role as Angel. My job title is digital infrastructure, but a very similar kind of IT manager kind of a role. Um, and similar kind of positioning towards a kind of ethical IT. Um, I think ours is a little bit perhaps more pragmatic. We're a little bit more, well, we'll deal with, Google for to some extent. Um, so yeah. But yeah, I've been there also about 8 years, funnily enough. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Sam. So this leaves me. I don't have that much or many years serving for the European Permaculture Network. For me, it's more 4 years, and it's more a resurrection process. So I had to kind of recreate the digital infrastructure of the European Permaculture Network. And with permaculture and with the permaculture ethics is a little bit difficult to say, we can use Google or we can use non-green hosting or have a website that uses a lot of energy. So with Earth Care, People Care, and Fair Share in mind, we kind of have to, are bound to digital permaculture. So yeah, ethical IT. Important. Let's talk. Let's see Angel's presentation.
All right, then I'll just share my screen real quick. Let me see. For some reason, I don't see the option of sharing my screen.
Your co-host should work. Do you see the share button itself, the green one in the status bar? It's called.
I do, I do. I
Oh
do.
wait, I'm still sharing something. Could that be?
No, I'm
Sharing
sorry.
No,
screen?
we are
I'm
still
probably
sharing.
sharing the
Okay.
music. Hold on. I forgot. Sorry.
All right. Mhm, mhm. Okay, for some reason, I still don't. Let me try to see if that works. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That should work.
Yeah. Right.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'll start there. I'm not able to see any of you right now, but if you need to say anything, please feel free to open your mic and stop me at any time. All right, so where do we start? And well, first of all, a small disclaimer. This presentation has a lot of information, so I'll try to guide you through it. And I'll make sure that we just focus on the things that are relevant, because there is a lot of information and we definitely don't need all of it right now. But the place that I like to start every time I talk about ethical IT has to do with data. And all the implications of data. So here there is a bunch of numbers, which is very hard to really fathom what that means. But like I really like this concept that how many Olympic pools would be if we would talk about that every gigabyte has a drop of water. Gigabyte is like well, I mean, I guess you're familiar with the concept of a byte and a megabyte and a gigabyte. And even if we are completely ignoring, let's say, the information or the numbers itself, the important thing to me is like this is really staggering, is that 90% of the world's data has been generated within the past 2 years. And this amount of data is actually doubling approximately every 4 years. And I would say this is probably already outdated, given the amount of data generation that has been going on through artificial intelligence since, I would say, 2 years ago. But basically, the growth is driven by, the usage of mobile devices, the so-called Internet of Things. Nowadays, like everything has a chip and it's connected to the internet. A lot of video streaming and cloud computing and artificial intelligence. We will go into that in a bit. But of course, this data in the end has, let's say, a place where this data is stored, this data needs to be moved. And all of that has a footprint because it relies on physical servers that are around the world, and they are interconnected with massive infrastructures that we don't need to go really deep into. And also all that infrastructure needs to be powered. And many of that infrastructure is actually not powered using renewable energies. Well, I think this is just important to see like how many actually cables are connecting the let's say the internet, which many people just think, okay, this is kind of a cloud. It's very in the air, but actually not. It has a very big infrastructure behind. Then when I was mentioning about this amount of data and how it doubles, we can see it with the evolution of the, for example, mobile connection. Probably you've all heard about 5G, which was a big topic some years ago. Nowadays, it's, I would say, at least in Europe, definitely fully implemented, and there are already some initial 6G implementation. But basically, you can see that, like in the first generation, people were only able to talk through the phone, which was like using a very low bandwidth. It was analog. And then the 2G switched to digital, where we could start sending the so-called SMS. With the introduction of smartphones, we were able to access also the web. And then we started being able to share more data, watch video, and do many other things with 4G. 5G has actually started to open a lot because now people can also stream using their devices. As I said before, vehicles, fridges, all kinds of different devices are also connected to the internet, which means there is a lot of much more data being moved around. And then 6G can even enhance that, no? Well, one of the conversations that I hope we can have is how much is actually needed of that crazy exponential evolution. So talking about exponential evolution, as we can see here, for example, this is the size of the so-called cloud computing market. The cloud computing market is basically everything which is running on a machine which is not your machine at home. So your mobile, when it uses an app, it connects to a server somewhere, and that is what it's called the cloud. But it's nothing else than like big racks of machines. And that is the same for applications, storages, etc., all kinds of things. AI is also growing exponentially. Unfortunately, I could only find data up to 2024, but I would say things have been developing in a very steep way also in the past year. And I hope we can also expand into that when we start the conversation. And obviously, all of that has a very heavy footprint. And here you have some idea. I like, for example, this concept of, for example, Google's annual energy could brew over 1 trillion Nespresso cups. I mean, it's just like a very random comparison, but I think you get the idea with that. And then Microsoft's annual water consumption could fill 9,000 Boeing 747 jets. Many people have asked, and I mean, it's not just to take it for granted, like why do we talk about not just energy consumption, but also water consumption? And it's because all these servers, all these data centers, they need, they run a lot of energy and a lot of computation, and they generate a lot of heat. And then they need water to cool down. So, and the amount of water that is needed, it's definitely very, very big. I think it's also worth mentioning that the 5 major tech companies, I mean, this is very US centric, but we can extrapolate also to other places in the world, although many of the big tech companies are actually based in the US, but they consume approximately, and I would say this has already grown, yeah, close to 2% of the whole US electricity. Yeah, and talking about like this big tech and these 5 big players, in the end, maybe some of you remember in the beginning of the internet, there was a lot of like really small pages that people could visit, and everything was way more distributed. But nowadays, most of the traffic actually goes to the big players. So if you can see, this is a web ranking that was done between September and November 2024. And for sure, since the adoption of AI, this has changed. But you can see the names in the let's say top 10 are Google, YouTube, which is again Google, Facebook, Instagram, which is Meta, WhatsApp, which is Meta, X.com, former Twitter, Wikipedia is a good exception, but I think that also has gone down since the adoption of AI. Here we have ChatGPT, which is probably much higher nowadays. Reddit and Yahoo, and then some other. But then we see the difference in traffic. So we're not talking just about like a first and then a close second. It's actually very mind-boggling, the difference between the traffic and the visits that go to Google, for example, and YouTube. And if you compare it to the second best, it's a huge difference. In terms of mobile apps, we see something very similar again. Maybe worth mentioning also the inclusion of TikTok, which probably nowadays it's again also much higher because it's the adopted social network of I would say young people nowadays. And all of that amounts to the so-called big tech, which is Google or its matrix, which is called Alphabet, which is like the name of the company or the conglomerate of companies that own all these different Google services. Then we have Apple, Facebook or Meta, Amazon or Microsoft. And well, this is an old picture from 2016. There was an initiative called GAFAM or La Quadrature, which was promoted by a French initiative. And they call the big tech GAFAM, if you take the initials, like GAFAM. And basically, they were warning us that when so much data is actually controlled by very few hands, we have several issues with that. And I think this has been made even more obvious in the past few months, but this has been already going on for a really long time. So having all this massive collection of data and all the internet traffic going through these big tech companies um, generates a lot of data collection and the so-called big data analysis, and that alone can be sold to third parties, and it can be used for marketing, for behavioral analysis. It's been already proven several times that it's also been used for um, tampering with, for example, the US elections and probably many others, by modifying the algorithms and showing, let's say, relevant data, or like the data that the people behind the algorithms actually wanted to show, to modify people's behaviors. Content selection, which means in the end, if you start favoring a content, then you get into what it's called an echo chamber, which is that the algorithm is going to show you more and more content of that type, and you're not going to be actually permeated by some other content that might contradict your views. Also, these big companies influence and lobby to, yeah, like for schools, university, local authorities, they lobby to pass bills actually that are, let's say, in favor of their sorry, in favor of their values, or like, let's say, their shareholders, and they are mostly contrary to actually what people actually would need, because we're in the frame of capitalism. And then it also keeps users on specific platforms, which in the end it results in like less resilience and more centralization. Sorry, I'm just gonna stop for a little bit. I'm just gonna check that we're all here. Can somebody just tell me if I'm still on?
Yeah, all good. Yes.
You're
Perfect.
still on. We can hear and see your
Perfect.
presentation.
So I'll just continue. It's just because I cannot see you, and then I get zero feedback. All right.
We are here.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So I'll continue. So this means that, well, this is quite bleak, I would say, or it could look quite bleak, but then we have, thankfully, some digital alternatives, which is actually what I would love, or I think we would love to focus on, to the mainstream narrative, which these are, I would say, the most important things that I would love to maybe go deeper into when we start the conversation, which is, for example, data literacy and privacy awareness, ensuring that everyone's really understanding how their data is used and by whom. And that's actually what we're doing today. But also digital degrowth and mindfulness. So do we actually need all that bandwidth? Do we need to keep on growing constantly? Digital sovereignty, like who are we depending on? What can we use that doesn't make us slaves of these big tech companies? Same with digital resilience. I have talked about software, but also the usage of so-called federated systems, which we can go into, and also like to make sure that we understand who is actually controlling the infrastructure that we are using to connect to the internet. And last but not least, also digital democracy and governance. Nowadays, we can actually let's say, use or make use of our democratic principles in a much more efficient way, having access to technologies. But for some reason, this is not always being used. I will go and try to break down a little bit these different elements now. I think this one is kind of self-explanatory. So we've been seeing actually more and more, since now it seems that it's expected from us that we're all very much connected to each other, and we are all the time online, there has been more and more initiatives promoting this connection and being more present. And these are just examples that I collected from different initiatives that were launched last year and early this year. But yeah, like I think it's very important to foster this kind of mindset. Like we do not need to embrace the narrative that we need to be necessarily connected all the time at all times. Then I also was mentioning proprietary software, which means if we accept to use, for example, the tools that Google or Meta are offering to us, they're typically black boxes, so we don't know exactly what's going on. Like there's been a lot of conversation about the algorithm. We don't know exactly like which kind of content this algorithm promotes. We don't know what's happening to our data. We are in the end bound to a very specific platform, and if it's free, it's probably because we're paying with our data, and that's very important to also understand. So instead of that, there is so-called free open source software, and this is something that, as you can see in the slide, so this means that people can access the code. They can see actually what's going on. They can see behind the algorithm, and it's free to use, to reuse, to share, to study. You can go as deep as you want, and you can also improve it. So this is actually much more aligned, as Dominik was mentioning before, for example, with the principles of permaculture. Another thing that we could also do is self-hosting, which means we don't need to have everything in the cloud that is being offered to us by big tech. We can also use our own machines, and if we don't have the knowledge, we can also go and host services in smaller companies that will also create a more resilient, let's say, and divided or like distributed hosting situation. Well, this I don't need to go very deep into, but something called the Fediverse. So there are different tools out there. The Fediverse basically means that it's a very cool piece of technology that where instead of using one single server, let's say, and maybe I'm just using words that not everybody will understand, but instead of having all the data and all activity in one single place, we are going to be able to have different machines that will talk to each other, and all data are going to be visible to everybody. But I will not go very deep into that now. There has been also examples of initiatives trying to create more free, open, and neutral network hardware. I'll just mention that there is a very good case study that's still up and running in Catalonia in Spain. And yeah, unfortunately, this has not really been taken on and being exported really like farther as far as I have been able to explore. But it's just like to open the box of the things that we actually can do. Infrastructure, well, I mean, you probably heard it since I created this presentation. Many things have actually happened in a very short span of time. And it's been clear to us in terms of geopolitics that the EU, for example, is looking into, and in my opinion, a little bit too late, into having independence from all these big tech companies, because it's very relevant to have these things. And there were already some approaches in 2023, but I would say since last year, things have been moving much faster at the EU level. And I also mentioned there are many tools that have been created to be able to use digital democracy and governance. And I will also not go into that very deeply, but not like technology can also be very good. And there are many use cases for that. So it's not all about degrowth, but I would say it's about conscious use of the different elements. Okay, so maybe I was a little bit fast and we can pause and go into other things. I just want to make a little short announcement. As I mentioned before, I'm representing Gen Europe, the Global Ecovillage Network. And if you want to go deeper into any of these topics with regards to sustainability and resilience, including ethical IT, every year we have Ecovillage gathering, and this year it's going to be in July from the 13th to the 18th in Nature Community in Germany. And you can find more information on these links. And I think that's it from my side.
Thank you, Angel. Awesome.
I'm not sure if let me see if I can, or maybe somebody can just like stop my sharing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Here we go. Okay, that was a lot to take in, a lot of information. Where we start, the actual data, the amount of data. Do you guys have an understanding? What was it? A zettabyte, was it? Is it 1,000 by the power of 7? I can't imagine the amount of data, like I can't fathom it. It's like it's already difficult with a terabyte. And this is far beyond. So, wow. When I look at the UPN server, we need some 2.6 gigabyte. Nothing compared to that. So
I guess the other part of that is what we're prepared to delete as well. It's like, there's projects like the Internet Archive, but link rot is also a very real thing. As sites go offline, we actually kind of have the potential to lose knowledge. So yeah, while it's probably not great to have all of that stuff, it does also beg the question, well, what aren't we going to keep, and what are we going to what's ephemeral data and what's actually worth holding on to. I guess it depends what you're doing with it. If you're a spy agency, you probably want to hoover it all up and analyze it all, but
For me, the problem is that, as Dominik was saying, we've really lost the sense of scale, and especially nowadays with AI, it's so easy to generate the internet is flooded nowadays with AI generated content, not only text but audio, video, websites, a lot of information, and all of that takes a lot of space, and that space needs again electricity and water. So we reached the point, I think already, that it's kind of getting completely out of control, in the sense that we don't know anymore how much, like, it's not anymore in humans' hands actually how much content is being generated, and that is really scary.
Yeah, definitely agree. And it's not just the amount of what's generated, it's the sheer how realistic it has become over the last years. It's like nowadays I have to look at a video and say, oh, has that really happened? Could that have been really happened? It's like I don't trust my eyes anymore. My wife was showing me a video. I looked at it on the screen, and you have these small screens, and you can't really see whether it's AI generated or not. Only if you have it on the large screen, then you can say, okay, I see the 6 fingers here or the 2 or 3 eyes there. But yeah, that's crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think that's why I was mentioning in the presentation before, like, for me, the first point about data literacy, like, to really understand. And it is true that nowadays it's very hard to distinguish what's AI generated and what's not. But at least to really truly understand that it's become really complicated to distinguish that, it's already the first step. And to be aware that there are alternatives to that, even though it might seem that doing something at a individual or collective level at our scale might be like a single drop of water in this big pool. But I think, well, if we don't start somewhere, there is never going to be a real change.
Yep, agreed.
I do agree, but there's a but. And the but for me is yes, but I think like we need to be realistic and like some battles are lost, like arguably email. You know, there was a time you could usefully host your own email. And like I could put a lot of effort into running an email server and it would be difficult and my emails wouldn't be delivered and it wouldn't be a very good service and it would take a lot of my time. And then most of the emails would end up on Google servers anyway, because all the recipients have got it all on Google. And so for me, it's like there's limited time, there's limited energy. In an ideal world, I wish email was different, but it's not. And so, you know, for me, it feels like that's just admit we've lost that one. You know, the spy agencies are hoovering up all of our emails, and that's just something we have to live with now. But there are other things that we can do, you know, that if you set that aside and just go, okay, we failed on email, you know, you can then use that energy for other activity, which maybe is more useful. And there's a battle coming down the road with, you know, perhaps it's around AI, perhaps we can win that one, but not if we're maintaining email servers 12 hours a day, you know.
Yeah. I still run my own email server. So, but I agree with you. It's difficult. I think we lost the battle years ago when Google Mail became so popular and had so many features. I remember the day when an email arrived and a person wrote to me, I'm now shutting down that conversation." I was like, how would you shut down an email conversation? And then I had to go to Google and find out that they have a feature in there where they can kind of tick the box that you don't receive any notification anymore. So, yeah, I agree. So what's the battle that we should concentrate on?
Maybe two things on that. So the first is I really like this idea because I think like for anybody who's been on the path of like trying to be more sustainable, more regenerative, we faced that in not just in the IT aspects. No, it's like uh, we cannot be pure, let's say. So where do we compromise? What do we do, and what do we just let go? And it's worth putting everything in context. However, I also want to say that at least in the very specific case of email, I don't know if you've seen, but for example, if you still own a Gmail address, now they've started to bomb lately with like you're approaching your storage limit, and then they are starting to actually ask people to pay. So for me, I think I'm not so sure this is completely over. I would say at some point when like when like companies like Google start demanding, and those demands are going to be higher and higher and bigger because they have the monopoly on email, then I believe it's our duty, at least people who are like tech savvy and like looking towards resilience, to be ready to have some alternatives. That's one of the reasons why, despite all the headaches, I still run an email server for Gen Europe as well.
Yep, yep. Could be one of the edges where we could come back in, at least kind of keep the alternatives like in people's minds, like, hey, there is Posteo or there is Proton Mail, so you don't have to be on Google. So it's not always that we have to run our own systems. It's the alternatives are already there where organizations have thought about actually. So it's not always that we have to do that on our own. Um, what else? I've taken some notes, but now I can't read my own handwriting. Yeah, the water consumption. This is something actually they all try to hide. If you go to the Google's efficiency report, it only tells you the PUE, so that's the power utilization efficiency, and not the WUE. So they're not talking about water. They try to avoid that topic totally. Um, Actually, there has a lot of things changed over the years. So, as far as I see it in Germany, they require now to have a recovery system. So they are not allowed to evaporate just the water, which would be the most efficient way of cooling. They have to run in a circle so that the consumption goes down. And I think during last year's Chaos Communication Congress, there was someone on stage who said that Germany's certain cities don't allow data centers anymore. They have no water. They 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 will simply consume too much.
I mean, I'd like to be a bit contrary here as well. I feel it. I want to be a bit contrary about everything, but yes, that is the current model of data centers. But I don't personally want to turn the internet off. Like I do want to keep, communication networks. And so, what would a more resilient permaculture kind of communications network look like? And at least in Northern Europe, we need a lot of heat, at least in the winter. What we're essentially talking about is turning electricity into heat. And can we not just use that heat more efficiently to heat buildings, to heat homes, is there a redesign and a reimagining of this infrastructure that means we can still have it, but in a different formulation? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I wrote about this in my book, that they actually should have laws in place that when they build data centers, it needs to be into the heating grid system of the city or so. They should not be allowed to just build it somewhere and the heat just goes somewhere. And no, it needs to be utilized totally. I think the city of Helsinki is doing something on that topic. They are building like underground or so and then using the heat. Yeah, but we are, like Angel said, we are far behind, kind of, even if they are now speeding up the, in the EU.
Yeah, and maybe like just to mention like a more global approach, it's true that I mean I really like that the EU is actually taking steps towards doing that. And I just wonder like how relevant is all that going to be if many other countries are actually not taking that into account. Um, but it's even more important, again, as I said, like to show examples of things that how can they be done, even if other countries and actually most of the data centers are not controlled by the EU or not in EU. So yeah, also to put that in perspective.
Yep.
I mean, the other part, as you do start to see state adoption of more kind of open source tools, they're going to get a lot better. It's the other thing, with that kind of investment and that additional developer time. I know that Germany has really adopted a thing called Matrix as a
Yeah,
messenger layer.
yeah,
And I really expect that Matrix will get a lot better.
yeah,
I think France has recently spun up a Zoom alternative, which is open source. So in some ways, I'm quite hopeful about that.
And the cool thing is that we're going to see what I was mentioning before, now that it is been made quite obvious because of the Trump administration, how they are handling things, like the antagony towards the EU. We're actually going to see a very interesting surge of open source and like sovereign initiatives in Europe. And I'm actually excited about that. It's just like a little bit too little too late, but well, we're definitely living in interesting times.
yeah. As long as we don't have to thank Trump that we are now getting open source everywhere, everything's fine. Yeah, but what Sam said, Germany matrix. Of course, there's a lot more than that. I think some of the states there they're adopting open source LibreOffice. There's of course the force and back in Munich with Microsoft and OpenOffice and Microsoft again, and now Microsoft built the new German thingy in Munich, and now the Munich is back on Microsoft. So, yeah.
Just noticing a couple of questions in the chat. I'm not sure I know how to answer them, but we could at least look at them.
So Lumia is asking some questions if you have time. Do you have any pro tips on how to reorganize non-human made content? Recognize. Recognize. How to, okay, can we answer that? Anyone?
Well, there used to be like there are some tools, like for example the Google image and video generator that they add like a watermark, it's called.
Yeah.
But there are some other tools that are actually not adding a watermark at all.
Yeah.
So generally, I would say like if it's some content that it's showing some kind of information, I would say as we've always, I guess, done, is like double check. Make sure that you get your information from several sources instead of just the one.
I suggest to, it's a little bit on the edge, but if you really want to see what AI is writing, you have to actually see AI writing. You have to get the experience to actually see what AI is generating to understand how they create the sentences. And usually, when you then read articles, let's say on Facebook or so, you would easily or spot that this sentence is not a human-made sentence. It's deliberately made by the machine, and you will, due to have it recognized while it was created, you will see it later on. That's at least my experience. Sorry, Sam.
No, sorry to interrupt. I mean that process is only going to get harder. You know, it's like you mentioned the six fingers thing that we all laugh at the machine. Actually, it's quite good at 5 fingers now. You know, that was last year.
Yeah.
You know, and it is only going to get harder, and I don't have any good answers to that question.
And just another additional thing, which I mean, it feels like I'm being the party pooper all the time, but an interesting thought around this is that because our youth is using AI all the time, so what's going to happen actually, the effect on that is that people are going to start expressing more themselves more and more like AI. So at some point, what Dominik mentioned actually will not be actually possible anymore unless we do a very deliberate let's say, turn into other directions.
Got a very small anecdote from this morning about that. My daughter designed her own birthday card invitations and was handing them out at school. And she was saying, "Oh, they're so good. They could have been made by AI." You know, that was her that was her benchmark. Is it's almost as good as AI what I've done here. You know, which is yeah.
Yeah, the topic AI will the genie is out of the bottle. We can't get it back probably. So we have the AI topic at the tutors of the Permaculture Association UK, you know, where you can kind of get your diploma in permaculture from. And there's already the usage of AI there, and we had to set rules like that. You actually have to mark the content that it was used by the help, or created by the help of AI and all that stuff. So, Lumia had another question: how to improve my own digital literacy? Some ideas on how to start.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, and I think, I mean, I do have some data that I have not yet collected that I can just share with you. But in the end, it's like if you know, like for example, attending these kind of webinars, it's already like a first step, and then you kind of already get like some idea of where to continue. But yeah, I wish I would have collected like there are several initiatives and organizations that are focusing on let's say ethical IT which is definitely very good to follow.
Yeah, we could put together a list, like exchange by email, email, and then publish. I think you, Angel, you have a blog at the Chen website, so we could probably just put a list of where to start, where to further reading. Yeah, cool. And then the last one. On which areas are you concentrating now in your organization projects? For example, what are the areas that you see as most important? So at the UPN, we have those switch parties. So every first Sunday of the month, 14 o'clock CET, we invite people to come to a switch party. And we have a scheme all over the year, and we are switching one proprietary software for an open source software. So the next one in March, that's from X to Mastodon, pretty simple one. And we have one or two experts in the field with us. And so we talk about the implication it could have or so. And I think this is something that helps to build literacy in the usage, and that there is actually alternatives out there.
I could say a little bit. I mean, I guess the main thrust, I mean, we're doing a few different things, but I guess the main one is trying to get a kind of Facebook type clone thing working together, a kind of social networking piece, which we put quite a lot of resource into over time. Yeah, and I guess the hope there is to have a little bit of digital sovereignty around the kind of the conversational social kind of aspect of the internet, which is currently, monopolized by Twitter and Facebook and such things.
And with regards to GEN, the Global Ecovillage Network, for some years, we've been putting some collection of tools together, and we've created like the so-called IT toolbox, because what I was mentioning before, no, like self-hosting is not something that is just very accessible to people in general. So we thought that it would be very interesting to compile a list of tools and create documentation on how people can self-host themselves, or even like rent, let's say, some services from some other companies to actually have access to these kind of tools instead of using the big tech. And lately, what we've been focusing more on is actually education. We've seen that this digital literacy is now more important than ever. So, yeah.
Let me follow up on that. How do you actually get the people to the digital literacy? So what's your starting point? Like the presentation you gave today, or do you have other steps in there?
I mean, so far we have limited capacity, unfortunately, but so far, yes, I've been attending different webinars and colloquiums and places where I've spread this information. The Gathering is another place where we also have some workshops about that, and I'm writing a series of articles, and I've also invited other people, tech-savvy people, including you, Dominic. I'm not sure if I reached out to Sam yet, but Sam, this is an official invitation for you also to write there. And it's like a series of articles hosted in our blog about precisely that ethical IT culture.
Nice. Happy to contribute. As soon as the conversions is over, I have time.
Can I vote mine with an LLM?
Only if it's hosted at your own computer.
Okay.
So good. Our time together is starting to come to an end. Would you like to have like some last words?
I mean, for me, I would say Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think any opportunity is always welcome to try to reach out. And for those of you in the audience, like if you thought this was interesting, like talk to your network and to your people about this because it's really, really relevant. It's not just a niche thing. It actually has a very big effect. And I think we're more and more realizing that, I guess.
Yep. It shapes our culture without us knowing that it actually shapes the culture. So it just does it while we are using it. So we definitely need a more sustainable culture in that way as well.
Yeah, similar. I mean, yeah, that's good to talk about this stuff, and I hope we didn't fall into technical jargon too much. I know that we probably did here and there, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's tough news for you. What can you do?
that's
I
the
don't
tech
think
world.
you I don't think you were too bad at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hold on, I'll stop that recording.